Most people today, they're dying with what I call the whole ball of wax. It's congestive heart failure on top of diabetes, on top of dementia, on top of maybe recurrent pneumonias. I think the reasonable and what the government asks us to do is to make a guesstimate. Would you guesstimate that this person would pass away within 6 months? Now, it sounds like a death sentence of sorts, but it isn't. You're allowed to go off of hospice. You're allowed to graduate from hospice. And we find that, quite interestingly, that is not as rare as you might think. It's quite interestingly almost always based upon the fact that that patient now has stopped their toxic therapeutics. Sometimes it's chemotherapy, sometimes it's not. Stopped their toxic therapeutics, and number two, gotten additional support in some way, whether that's help for the family, whether that's additional hygiene. Hospice will come in, for instance, and bathe the patient. They can't come and sit there for 8 hours, but they can do an awful lot in terms of management of symptoms. I think in some cases it's because we've relieved the pain. The patient doesn't have as much pain, and they're able to sit up, they're able to go out to the back porch, they're able to expand their lungs, they're able to move their bowels, they're able to do these things. And so they're not going to live forever, but they're going to live better for whatever period of time. And you can be recertified on hospice. If you go beyond 6 months, you're simply recertified if you're still eligible. It brings to mind a circumstance. When I was down in Gettysburg, I had a patient who was on hospice, and I renewed it 6 times. Well, that would be a renewal for 3 years. And this was when hospice was maybe a little bit more liberal, or they weren't looking at as many of the facets. And I had the feds call me up and say, hey, what gives? Why is your patient been enrolled on hospice 6 times? Why aren't they dead? And my answer was, I don't know. She must have a pretty good doctor. The reality there was support. The family got a lot more support. Interestingly, I was able to negotiate with the feds that we keep this patient on hospice, because I really thought that loss of the hospice benefit for them would not be appropriate, would result in more hospitalization, more difficulties within the family. And some of these families are very, very delicate. When I say more difficulties in the family, I mean difficulties. Like a daughter runs away from home, or they don't have, they no longer have a social worker who's been mitigating their other circumstances, their electric bills, or whatever it is. They lose that support. And when they lose that support, that's when things go wrong. And quite interestingly, it is my belief that things become a lot more expensive. And we as the taxpayer should demand the best as well. We should demand the right medicine at the right time, because that will result in the best outcome.